Nikhil is a college student who plays football during leisure time. He wants to pursue the game seriously and start strength training at the college gym. He seeks your advice. He has no prior experience in performing workouts. As a coach, therapist, or a trainer, how do you help him to design a sports specific conditioning program of 8 weeks? If you're looking for answers, you're in the right place. Welcome to this NPTEL offered course on physical medicine and rehabilitation in sports. And for today's lecture on designing a sports specific conditioning program, you have with me Wing Commander Chandrasekhar Guru. I'm a sports medicine specialist with Armed Forces Medical College. The learning objectives of this topic will be to understand the purpose and the principles or factors required in designing a sports conditioning program. What are the various steps involved in designing? We'll go through each and every step one by one, and we'll also discuss a case scenario to see the implementation of the practical aspects of these concepts in your day-to-day use. So, we've been discussing about this sports demand and sports specific conditioning as such. So, what is the need for it? The need arises from the sports demand per se, the biomechanical nature of the sports, the physiological aspects, the neuromuscular adaptation that is required, and the bioenergetics. They are all form the integral part of the performance of that particular sports. So, incorporating a sports specific conditioning program which help in kind of enhancing the performance, reducing the injury risk, and it also helps to optimize the energy system that needs to be utilized for this particular sports. So the key principles are, as we've gone through it again and again, the principles of progressive overload, principle of specificity, principle of periodization or variation, and more importantly, it is the recovery which is required for adaptations to take place. So these will result in a good effective training program, and recovery is again very essential for necessary adaptations to happen. With this in background, let's see how the designing of a sports specific conditioning program happens. The various process involved in planning such program starts from sports analysis. So we need to first analyze the sports that needs to be played. How about the athletes present level of the various motor qualities assessment that needs to be done. Third process would be to set well defined goals for the particular training program. Subsequently, periodizing the program into your routine sports training, and monitoring the program and how the adaptation happens. These are all the various process of designing the program. So let's go ahead with the stepwise approach. Step one would be to analyze the sports demand, right? The sports demand should be analyzed in terms of the movement pattern that is required. What are the primary energy system that contribute to the sports demand? What about the injury risk of playing the sport per se, of different joints, or what type of injuries are common? So that's the injury risk. Then comes the work is to rest ratios, manipulating the training intensity and the volume and the resting intervals that decides the attaining a specific or achieving the specific strength related goal for that particular sports, and more importantly the athlete profile as well. So let's deeper into these aspects. Movement pattern analysis, here it is been emphasized again and again that quality and the form of the movement is more important than the load that the individual is able to uh, lift. So quality is very important, so it is important to pay attention to the motor control and the form in which the individual does a particular movement. So it has to be assessed in all three different planes, including the sagittal, the frontal, and the transverse plane. So that is very important. It also includes the speed and the direction aspect of it, which is required for that particular sports, that needs to be analyzed. And every sport has different kind of energy system or the demand, so accordingly the movement pattern also varies depending on the type of demand. If it is a power or an endurance demand, the movement actually differs as well. So conditioning drills, when they are being planned, these drills should simulate these movement patterns as far as possible, so that the principle of specificity also can be catered into these programs. And more so, conditioning program should be considered as an important aspect to understand the deficit in the movement pattern and try to address these deficits during the conditioning program. uh, the other important aspect of sports demand analysis is the energy system, that is the predominant energy system. Say we have seen this particular graphic right from the course on introduction to exercise physiology and sports performance. So the broad categories of energy system are short term, intermediate term, and long term energy system. So depending on the sports, the particular energy system predominates, that needs to be identified. Say for sprinting, it is predominantly the short term. Soccer is a mixed sports where about say 70% oxidative, 30% and this thing, depending on the position as well. Endurance events predominantly have more of oxidative system. So understanding this basic concept is important when you're planning sport specific conditioning programs. So for example, soccer has 70% of aerobic and 30% of anaerobic. Weightlifting, if you see, is 90% of ATP phosphocreatinine only. How about the injury risk profiling? When you say injury risk profiling of the sports, when you analyze that, why it is important? Because it gives an idea about the common injuries that are foreseen, or that has happened over a period of time in these particular sports. So you can pay attention to these injuries, and you already can also look at certain joints and the muscle groups that are at risk of such injuries. Accordingly, these groups of muscles and joints can be targeted in your conditioning program. So that's the importance of injury risk profiling. So you can also look at various preventive strategies that are already in place in specific sports. Say for example, football with a lot of humongous amount of research has gone in, and then the FIFA has come up with something called as the FIFA 11 plus program. They have a systematic way of progressing from a beginner to an intermediate to an advanced level of footballer, with the different movement patterns, and gradually moving into more of an agility and a direction based drills. So these are framed as part of your pre-session warm-up routines. So if these are established preventive strategies are already available. So injury risk profiling helps in kind of framing such injury prevention programs as part of your conditioning program as such, as a warm-up program as such, it can be used. So moving on to the next important aspect of sports demand is the athlete profiling, because it is one of the critical aspect wherein with respect to the athlete, it is important to understand what is the past experience of the athlete on the sports. I would mean to say the training age of the athlete, and what is the phase in which the individual presently is in. And what about the injury status? Was there any past history of any particular injury? Because it is one of the single most important factor that makes the individual more prone for injury during the training. So that can be addressed if that profiling is done. And in case if the individual has an injury, had an injury earlier, so how the injury was treated, was it rehabilitated well, was there a proper return to sport criteria based progression that was there, was there any kind of difficulty faced by the athlete during the return to sport phase, or also you can also find out whether a long term re-injury prevention program was instituted as part of that previous return to sport criteria. So all this information will help in kind of incorporating certain exercises or conditioning program in your design. Moving on to the step 2 is assessing the athlete. So having information about the sports demands and the athlete is the first step. Second step is to know actually what is the level of these deficits, impairments, or the fitness level of the athlete. So it involves kind of assessing, or rather in simple words, it could be a pre-participation screening. It can be clubbed with that as well, wherein you before even starting a training program, it is important to assess the individual's fitness level as well, so you can have incorporate a movement screening, movement screen test, like a functional movement screen test, which we had discussed in the previous lecture. We can kind of also assess the strength and the power that the individual can produce by doing a standing broad jump, or a counter movement jump, or a one arm for individual, or a group of muscles. uh, that can give an idea. Aerobic and anaerobic testing can be done using a field test like a yo-yo or a Canadian beef test. If you have a good sophisticated lab, you can go for lab based equipment, a lab based equipment based assessment of the aerobic and anaerobic testing using Wingate or a Astrand or a treadmill lactate threshold test. So these gives additional input about the anaerobic and aerobic testing. You also need to assess the mobility and the stability assessment, basically to check on the flexibility aspect of that individual. So knowing this, assessing the individual, having it gives you a baseline of what the individual is presently having, and subsequently you can also kind of compare with the standards or reference population and see what is required for the sport and how much is the deficit. So that helps in kind of addressing to this deficit during the conditioning programs. Thus it helps in customizing the program further. Once it is done, so these are what you are looking at during the conditioning program. So you can set certain simple goals, because a program without a clear goal will not be effective at all. So it is important to have a goal which is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant to what the training is being given, and it should be time bound. Without that, it is not possible to have a structured objective program. And with that, we move on to the next step, that is periodizing whatever the goal and the program that you have made into the training cycle. So we have discussed about the training cycle, which is divided into macro cycle, mesocycle, and microcycle. So you will have to periodize your conditioning program into the training cycle. The periodization plan may be a linear plan, or a non-linear model, or a block periodization model, or a flexible periodization model, depending on the type of athlete or the season in which the athlete is. You can plan the periodization model. So the periodization gives you an opportunity to peak the performance at the appropriate time, and also reduces the chance of overtraining. But this entirely depends on the level of the athlete, the sports calendar, and as well as the training age. One of the important aspect in periodization is the aligning the training to the energy system. So the training should address the needs of energy system in terms of either an interval training, or a continuous training, or an high intensity interval training, or a sprint interval, or an aerobic capacity that needs to be trained for that particular individual depending on the sports demand. So matching the intensity, volume, duration, and the recovery or the rest interval is critical. Also, addressing the mobility and the movement preparation is also essential in the periodization aspect, wherein the movement patterns and the deficits which we have assessed from the athlete can be included in the dynamic warm-up. Say something which we discussed about the FIFA 11 plus. So you can include specific type of exercises which would address to the need or the deficit of the athlete in the warm-up session, as a dynamic warm-up session. It can be used as a separate joint mobility sessions to improve the range of motion. You can include core activation in 2 sessions for further activating the addressing to the movement needs. So it need not be a separate session, but it can be part of your actual training as such if you have a structured plan. So preparing the movement quality kind of makes the individual less susceptible to injury, and it enhances the performance. The next important aspect is, once all these steps are addressed, now you need to design the components of conditioning that we have discussed. They are the developing the basic motor qualities, namely the aerobic training, speed and agility drills, flexibility and mobility drills, resistance training, and the balance and the coordination drills, right? So how do you design and accommodate them in your periodization plan? So if you focus on this particular table, let's focus on the preparation phase. So in the preparation phase during the off season, where the sports conditioning program has a major chunk or a major role to play in kind of laying the foundation for the individual to build up on the sports specific activity subsequently. Here the components in terms of the conditioning program should mainly focus on aerobic training and weight training, wherein you need to have basic level of cardiorespiratory fitness and basic overall strength for further building up of the sport specific needs. So the main emphasis here is on aerobic training and weight training. However, this emphasis is given also to anaerobic training and plyometric training. Rather, the emphasis is less because you need to have certain level of strength that is required for further doing a plyometric training or an aerobic training. So that amount of time is required to start implementing these programs in your off season period as well. And you also need to pay attention to the technique training, but then however the attention is not more focused. But then when you move on to a pre-competitive phase and the post season phase, when you see, the kind of attention is more towards the technique training. Here movement and the technique is given more importance because it is going to simulate the sports, and it kind of activates the neural counterpart. And during post season, obviously you can use this opportunity to correct the movement pattern in case the individual has a wrong or a counterproductive movement action. So that can be addressed during the transition phase. If you also notice, the anaerobic training is also paid more attention here, because now the individual has developed a basic level of strength, and the working or the progression of the strength training program has moved on to the sport specific level. So here it is more of an anaerobic training that is required, that can be improved upon or imparted during the conditioning program. When we actually go on to the competitive phase, conditioning does not have much role to play, since it is more of a sports specific training that has much role to play in terms of peaking and tapering. But however, it is important in team sports or in sports which has multiple competitions over a period of time, like during the season, say for example IPL or ISL or a league championships. So during such time the competition may be spaced at different frequencies, so it is important to also maintain your fitness level. So their conditioning has a role to play, however at a lesser level, to a lesser extent. But then the importance or the success of a conditioning program not only lies in giving the right kind of training, but also in giving the right kind of time, periodizing the recovery time. So recovery time or the recovery strategies is what is where the adaptation actually takes place, and it should never be neglected. So the first and foremost recovery modality that one has to strictly follow is the sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene has to be given highest level of importance in terms of recovery strategy, because this is the time where your hormonal changes and your repair process naturally happens. So that needs to be strictly followed during your training program. Active recovery days have to be specifically designed during the microcycle as such, and incorporate various recovery methods in these days, during these days. And another important aspect which we discussed it in the previous lectures as well, nutrition and hydration, because especially with strength training and strength conditioning programs, it is important to have the right nutrition. If the nutrition is not there, it is something like trying to ride a bike with empty fuel. So it is important to adequately refuel the body after a training session. So the body is in need of maximum demand, and it is ready to kind of absorb more nutrition after an activity. So post exercise nutritional refueling is very, very important. Various modalities that can be used to improve the recovery aspect of it are massage, cold water, immersion, and compression techniques. Monitoring again is an important aspect, because without monitoring you will not be having a measurable method in place to further progress the training. So the various tools that we have in place for monitoring training adaptations are rating of perceived exertion, GPS based tracking on the vest, heart rate based objective parameters have been developed and widely used in wearables. Certain power output measures using jump heights and sprint times can be used to monitor the effect of training on the individual and how the individual is responding to that. So whatever gets measured only it can be improved upon. Without measuring, it is not possible, and all the data that you actually capture during the process of training helps you to make smart decisions and also helps in framing smart goals as well. So even though we have been speaking more on the right approach to do designing of a sports conditioning program, it is also important to understand certain common errors so that we try to mitigate them and then try to have an effective sports conditioning program. As been being said again and again, using a one size fits all program is a major flaw in an ineffective program. So it is important to have an individualized, customized program based on the monitoring that you do. There should be a long-term planning, because long-term planning gives a kind of structured goal, short-term goal to both the athlete as well as to the administrators as well as to the therapist and the trainers. If the monitoring is not there, it is something like wasting your energy into a particular thing without any direction. So it is important to have direction, and direction comes with monitoring the load. Monitoring the load is very important. Overtraining can be avoided if you monitor the load properly, both the internal load and the external load, and always pay attention to recovery. Recovery is very important for effective implementation of a training program. So let's say a case scenario starts. Let's start with the initial question. Nikhil is a college student who plays football during leisure time. He wants to pursue the game seriously and start strength training at the college gym. He seeks your advice. He has no experience in performing workouts earlier. As a coach, trainer, or a therapist, how would you help him to design a sports specific conditioning program of 8 weeks? This was the question that we started. So, the individual is a young recreational athlete with no prior strength training, right? The first step would be to know the need analysis, that is by doing an athlete profile, sports needs, especially the football and the kind of position that individual is going to play. Knowing about the annual training cycle to periodize the training program. Assessing the individual gives you an idea of what is the present status of the individual, what is the baseline measure, and then how you want to further progress it. It helps in planning a sports conditioning program over 6 to 8 weeks. You can start it with an aerobic conditioning, progress to kind of mobility and flexibility towards 4 to 6 weeks. Probably, since the game is a football, I would incorporate more of a FIFA 11 plus based exercises from the beginner level, since he is an amateur or an recreational athlete who just started to play. So you can start with beginner profile of mobility and flexibility training of FIFA 11 plus. Gradually move on to the subsequent intermediate and advanced level with speed and agility drills towards the later part of the conditioning program. And during the entire 8 weeks period, it is important also to frame your exercises based on the deficits that has been identified during the assessment process. And it is also important to monitor the progress. How the individual is monitored over the period of 8 weeks gives an idea to further plan your strength training program as well as the sports training program. So to summarize, designing involves a process of need analysis with athlete, sports and the goals. Assessment gives a baseline idea about the deficits and also helps in kind of monitoring the progress. Periodization with the training plan gives you objective goals, helps in framing a structured program, and also yield an optimized performance at the end of the program. The importance is given to all the components of the conditioning program, starting from aerobic conditioning to the strength resistant training to balance and coordination, which lays the foundation for further build up of the individual to the next level. So customization of the plan based on this regular feedback and the assessment helps in kind of giving a better outcome with the sport specific conditioning program. So for those of you who are interested in further in-depth knowledge on these aspects of sport specific conditioning program, how to design them, you are welcome to go through these resources. They have very good resources for these topics. Thank you for the patient listening. Jai Hind.